What up, what up, what up, what up? Can y'all hear me? All right, I don't know if this live. Okay. All right, let me make sure y'all getting this live, all right? I need to make sure y'all getting this live. Share this motherfucker right now. Share this live right now. Cause we live tonight from Columbia this morning. We live. Let me, you know what, before we get started, let me let you listen to the smooth jazz of Weezy F.
All right, sis, where you taking me?
What the fuck, though? What the fuck though?
Let me check my audio.
What the fuck?
Give me a second.
Oh, how you get busy?
5, 4, 3, 2, I'm a cut.
My phone died.
I'm a cut, though.
All right, sis.
What the fuck? What the fuck, though?
Cut it up.
me said.
5, 4, 3, 2, I got 4, 3, 2, I'm a cut, though. What the fuck, though?
Come on.
Where the love go?
Show 'em how you get busy.
5, 4, 3, 2, I'm a cut. I'm a cut, though.
All right, sis, where you taking me?
Yeah, man.
What the fuck? What the fuck, though?
Cut it up.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go. What the fuck? What the fuck? 5, 4, 3, 2, I'm a
Show 'em how you get busy.
5, 4, 3, 2, I'm a cut. I'm a cut, though.
Tava aí.
All right, sis, where you taking me?
What the fuck, though? What the fuck? What the fuck, though?
Alex Hormozi, welcome back to
What
the
the
show.
fuck? What the fuck, though?
Cut it up.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go.
Dos amigos.
What the fuck? 5, 4, 3, 2,
Show 'em how you get busy.
5, 4, 3, 2. I'm a cut, though.
All right,
right.
sis, where you taking me?
What the fuck? What the fuck, though?
Cut it up.
5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go. 4, 3, 2, I'm a cut, though. What the fuck, though?
Come on.
Where the love go?
Show 'em how you get busy.
5,
What y'all
4,
think about
3,
this?
2, I'm a cut.
DJs actually do.
What y'all think about this right here? I'm just getting started. Getting started. Just getting started.
What the DJs actually do.
Tonight. All right.
Dials are they pressing? What are the buttons doing?
All right. All right. So look, this is what I want to do. Okay. That's just a little introduction so I can check the audio and everything. All right. Let me turn this down just a little bit. All right. So look, I saw some incredible stuff by my boy Alex Hormozi, and I kind of want to get some of y'all thoughts on it. All right. So what we can do is, how about we go straight in?
Alex Hormozi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
Truly a pleasure.
And I think they probably convince themselves that they're smarter than they are. And so if you were smart, then you would be rich. And so then it follows that there's probably a series of traits of behavior that you don't do, either because you think you're above them, or you don't know about them. So either it's a declarative knowledge deficit, meaning you don't know about the thing, which has nothing to do with the intelligence. Like if somebody eats a banana, and they're from a different country and they just eat it through the skin, it doesn't mean that they're stupid. It means they're ignorant, which is very different. That's a declarative deficit. Then there's procedural deficits, which is knowing how to. And I think one of the big difficulties with smart people is they have tremendous amounts of declarative knowledge and very little procedural knowledge. And so it's like saying you read a book on how to do a private equity deal and you know everything that has to happen, but you've never done a private equity deal. It's probably unlikely that you know how to do a private equity deal. And so delineating those things has been helpful for me. And since the procedural knowledge has signaled that I spend on declarative knowledge, and I try to get to the procedural part of it as fast as I possibly can, because I know that I'll learn significantly more by failing and doing it than reading 100 books on sales versus doing 100 phone calls. Like you'll learn a lot more in the first 100 calls.
Yeah, it's interesting. This to me is, I'm always trying to get entrepreneurs to, one, think from first principles, which most people don't even know what that means. Sure. So you start by defining it, but combustion engine. Sure. So you can get in and be like, well, I know what has to happen for this car to go. And if I know what has to happen, you can break it, you can pull it apart, and I'll be able to put it back together because I actually understand how this works. So how does wealth creation work?
You have to have a mechanism for letting people know about your stuff. And so that can happen on a variety of channels. That typically.
So there's two different types of ignorance that he's kind of come to realize that exists. One of them is that when you don't know facts, okay? The other one is when you don't understand behaviors. And let me see. And right now, what he's going over is what he calls a common factor analysis for retroactive look back, which is the way that he grows and builds wealth. What he does, he maximizes the amount of failures that he has by doing something several times. And then after that, he looks at what worked, and then he does what worked 100 times, and he see what worked of what works, and he keeps on repeating that until he builds some kind of successful behavior, and that's what he's going over now. And he says what his goal has been thus far is to don't worry about having factual knowledge and focus on building an understanding of not have a deficit of not knowing behaviors, successful behaviors.
Alex Hormozi.
100 phone calls. Like you'll learn a lot more in the first 100 calls.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Think you're above them.
Alex Hormozi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
Truly a pleasure.
Mutual.
Let me ask, why do smart people stay poor?
They don't do the things that makes people rich. And so if you were smart, then you would be rich. And so then it follows that there's probably a series of traits of behavior that you don't do, either because you think you're above them, or you don't know about them. So either it's a declarative knowledge deficit, meaning you don't know about the thing, which has nothing to do with the intelligence. Like if somebody eats a banana, and they're from a different country and they just eat it through the skin, it doesn't mean that they're stupid. It means they're ignorant, which is very different. That's a declarative deficit. Then there's procedural deficits, which is knowing how to. And I think one of the big difficulties with smart people is they have tremendous amounts of declarative knowledge and very little procedural knowledge. And so it's like saying you read a book on how to do a private equity deal and you know everything that has to happen, but you've never done a private equity deal. It's probably unlikely that you know how to do a private equity deal. And so delineating those things has been helpful for me. And since the procedural knowledge has significantly more utility on a daily basis from a money-making perspective, I have reduced, or at least this is me, transitioning to me, but like I have reduced the amount of time that I spend on declarative knowledge. And I try to get to the procedural part of it as fast as I possibly can, because I know that I'll learn significantly more by failing and doing it than, reading 100 books on sales versus doing 100 phone calls. Like you'll learn a lot more in the first 100 calls.
Yeah, it's interesting. This to me is, I'm always trying to get entrepreneurs to, one, think from first principles, which most people don't even know what that means. Sure. So you start by defining it. But this feels like that, getting to understand the essence of what it is so that you understand it the way that somebody understands a combustion engine. Sure. So you can get in and be like, well, I know what has to happen for this car to go. And if I know what has to happen, you can break it, you can pull it apart, and I'll be able to put it back together because I actually understand how this works. So how does wealth creation work?
You have to have a mechanism for letting people know about your stuff. And so that can happen on a variety of channels. That typically happens either one-on-one or one-to-many. And so one-on-one would be you knock on doors, you reach out to people via DM, you send emails, you send direct mail, you make phone calls, you send text messages. Any of those are one-on-one. Outreach is one way of letting people know. You could do one-to-many to people who already know who you are, which is basically today's equivalent of a billboard, which is social media. You make posts, you make content. The third way would be that you run paid advertisements. So on those same platforms, you just pay to get the exposure rather than doing it by earning it through quality content. And then the kind of like the door four would be using those three methods to then get someone who will run an ad to get to that person. So these are the core things that someone must do to promote whatever they have. Because if we think about it from what must occur in order for a transaction to happen, well, people have to know that you exist or that your product exists. No one can buy something without knowing it exists. And so we have to start with promotion. The second component is that they have some sort of voluntary exchange. And so that means you have goods and services that are exchanged for money. And so I think the idea of like money being created really only happens with the government. The thing that was there's a business behind it. So like the walls you have, there's the person who manufactured the raw materials, there's the person who sourced the materials, there's the labor that went to business inside, which is another business. There's the distributor that you bought this from. Like there's all these pieces when people are like, man, I don't know what opportunities there are. I'm like, you can literally open your eyes and everything that you see has a business behind it. And so from the value component, for people who are, I'll just tie this into people who are starting out. I recommend most people start with services because it requires no capital and you require time. And when you start out, you use what you have. And so if you have no money and you only have time, then you trade the time for money. And so either you're going to do something that other people don't want to do that they know how to do. So like taking someone's trash out, doing lawn care, washing things, like cleaning. Those are all things that people know how to do but don't want. Then the second level of that is doing things that people don't want to do or know how to do. And obviously that's knowledge work, which you get. The amount that you can get paid is predicated on the value that whatever that skill deficient. And then the thing that you give them is you're going to give them some amount of time back, either the time to learn the skill or the time to do the skill. And then once that exchange is made, then both people say thank you because they didn't want to do the work and you wanted the money. And so everyone wins. And then around and around we go.
Okay, so the around and around we go. You and I both know that even though you just laid out a lot of things that are very, very true, do you think about the gap as to why the vast majority?
I think a lot of people spend a lot of time on everything that isn't revenue generating. And so everything that's not what we just outlined, like if you're not reaching out to people one-on-one, you're not posting content, or you're not running ads, or getting in touch with someone who already has an audience of the people you want to reach, if you're not doing that right now, then nothing else you do matters. It doesn't matter. You have to have something to sell, which, like I said, you can start with your time. Very easy. And my recommendation is to go and get money from a stranger. Doesn't matter what you sell. Just get $1 from a stranger to actually walk through the process. That's the procedural knowledge. Like it's one thing, okay, oh shoot, now I can get my first dollar across. Once you get the first dollar across, the second one comes very fast. And so why don't people...
So I am now teaching a business scaling course.
Oh, cool.
And so, yes, it actually is a lot of fun. Where can people find it?
Oh,
Stuff is really wild. It hits like bricks because he said, why are people not making the money? Is because people are doing everything else to not make money.
Set that up. But yeah, on school. And it's got me asking a lot, like, okay, there is a concept in sailing that I am beginning to think, other than intellect, which unfortunately matters, I'm beginning to think is like the thing. Okay. It's called velocity made good, VMG.
Okay.
And the whole idea is that you can have a lot of wind, but if your sails are not moving at all because your sails just aren't able to capture where you want to go. And that to me, like pulling that apart as to what are the things that people don't understand, what are like as somebody who's now scaled a business tremendously, what is it in all of those things that allows you to capture the potency of your intellect, to understand that just making content doesn't do it. The content has to be aimed in a direction. It has to have a goal in mind. How would you teach entrepreneurs how to quote unquote angle the sales?
So the process that at stuff I did and see what worked better than other stuff. And then I say, okay, well, the top 10%, what things did they have in common?
So this is the part where he goes into the way that he thinks about, the way that he improves his behavior over time and getting better and better to do a specific thing.
And then the bottom 10% or the bottom half, what things did those lack compared to the top 10%? And then I try and do a next batch of activities, whether it's phone calls, whether it's content, whether it's product iterations, that then do more of the thing that worked. And so that process has been, I think, the fastest feedback loop that I've had. So rather than trying to find like a specific course around something super niche, which gets really difficult the more niche it is, I rely on the universe for feedback. Look at the top 10 or 20%, look at the common factors, and then do a whole next batch of 100 with those common factors. If performance goes up, then the variables that we isolated were the correct ones. And then within that next batch, there will be another top 10 or 20% that by variation of repetition, which will always happen, there will be other mutations like in DNA that occurred in that subset that I can then replicate themselves from doing the 100 repetitions. Because
if you want, so that's basically, if you want to be a singer or a rapper, you need to do 100 songs. And then you look at the 10% of those songs that got the most traction. And then you figure out what worked with that 10%. And then do that 100 times. And then recreate the process. Do that and see what worked in that 10%. And that's how you improve your behavior over time.
They think that it's the fallacy of the perfect pick. Like they're going to get it all right so that they don't have to fail the first time. But like one of my favorite scenes in The Matrix is when Neo tries to jump across both buildings and then he falls. I just like that as a failure as an assumption rather than something to avoid. Like Elon was able to get the rockets up because he failed 5 times faster than people were able to do one. So he got 5 failed rockets out before he got his 6th. And everybody was looking at the 5 failures, but he's like, well, look at how much further we got with each one. And I think that so one of the difficulties with skill is that masters have more milestones along the way. And so they're able to mark progress with more nuance. A beginner only sees kind of a binary outcome between it worked or it didn't work. But for me, if I'm going to go into a new advertising channel, for example, if I want to say, I want to start doing cold outbound. Well, I actually have a great story about this. When we started doing cold outbound for Gym Launch, my executive team, so, not like experienced people, about 3 or 4 months in, basically did like an intervention with me. And they said, you're putting all of your time and attention to this. We think this is a shiny object, using my words against me, right? This is a woman in the red dress. And we think you should stop and let's double down on what works, which for us at the time was paid ads and some content. And the thing is that they were too far away to know the progress we were making. And so they just saw that we basically hadn't made any sales. We made 1 sale and like 3 from. So then we finally got the list and they're like, okay, but no one's picking up. We have to enrich the data. Okay, then we enrich the data. Then no one was still picking up. So then we're like, oh, well, we have to find out how to get people to pick up. So we have to do local call wrapping on our phone so that increases the pickup frequency. So then people start picking up, but then no one wanted to book a call because our script was off. So we fixed the hook and then people would listen to us, but they didn't like the offers. And we fixed the offer. Then people came to the second call, but then they weren't showing up to the second call. And then we were like, okay, we have to create a follow-up sequence. Now, at this point, they're like, hey, you need a beginner. You don't know you're 33% of the way there. And so I think one of the difficult things as a beginner is that there is a leap of faith. Like when you do your first week at the gym, you're not going to get results. but it doesn't mean that working out's wrong. It just means you're measuring on the wrong time horizon. And I think one of the things that has thrown a ton of beginners off is the understanding of volatility and volume. So basically, when you have a new business or a new endeavor, what appears inconsistent or volatile is typically a function of doing too little volume. And so it's like, one sale comes in every, a couple weeks, I'm still, but if we look at the activities that me, right? This is a woman in the red dress. And we think you should stop and let's double down on what works, which for us at the time was paid ads and some content. And the thing is that they were too far away to know the progress or data from. Where do we get these lists from? So then we finally got the list and we're like, okay, but no one's picking up. We have to enrich the data. Okay, then we enrich the data. Then no one was still picking up. So then we're like, we have to find out how to get people to pick up. So we have to do local call wrapping on off. So we fix the hook and then sequence. Now at this point, they're like, hey, you need the way there. But if you're a beginner, you don't know you're 33% of the way there. And so I think one of the difficult things as a beginner is that there is a leap of faith. Like when you do your first week at the gym, you're not going to get rid of that. Has thrown a ton of beginners off is the understanding of volatility and volume. So basically, when you have a new business or a new endeavor, what appears inconsistent or volatile is typically a function of doing too little volume.
What I would like to do is to kind of like think about that just a little bit more. I want to understand how to not measure. How to not fall in the trap of measuring in the wrong time horizon. As like a new business, as a new business person in the sales process and making your first $1 million, $100,000, $50. You don't know what you don't know, and what can. Alex Hormozi's point. Alex Hormozi's point about the time horizon is key for new entrepreneurs. When you're just starting out, it's easy to fall into the trap of judging success based on short-term results or the immediate milestones. The problem is when you're new success often takes longer to materialize, and early signs might not be reliable. To avoid measuring your business on the wrong time horizon, here are a few strategies you can implement. Shift focus to the process. I've heard this before, but I've heard this more with making content. But I think it's valuable in every ambitious endeavor that you have. Like you gotta fall in love with the process and not the results, because you don't know when you'll get the external rewards of the work that you're working on. But ChatGPT says in order to not fall into not thinking about falling into the wrong time horizon as a new business entrepreneur and whatnot. You got to shift your focus to the process, not just the outcome, not just results. In the early stages, focus on what you can control, the activities that drive long-term success. For instance, are you getting more customers in your pipeline? Are you improving your conversion rates? These activities should be your primary metric, not just the revenue or profits. So he also kind of spoke a bit about how Elon Musk, his first few missile launches, they failed. Let's say 3, 4. The first 4 or 5, they failed. But in his mind, he could have been looked at as a failure, as a disaster. But in his mind, he's like, well, we got farther than the last time. So that again ties into what Hormozi is talking about when he's saying that the way that he improves his behavior over time is by looking at common factor analysis for retroactive look back. He does a lot of work, another lot of work into just doing that. And then he repeats the process. He does 100, looks at 10%, see why that was successful, does 100 more successfully in the successful way that he determined, and then he looks at the 10% again, and he keeps iterating on that process, and that's how he builds successful behaviors.
Alex Hormozi, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
Truly a pleasure.
Mutual. And so I think one of the difficult things as a beginner is that there is a leap of faith. Like when you do your first week at the gym, you're not going to get results. But it doesn't mean that working out's wrong. It just means you're measuring on the wrong time horizon. And I think one of the things that has thrown a ton of beginners off is the understanding of volatility and volume. So basically, when you have a new business or a new endeavor, what appears inconsistent or volatile is typically a function of doing too little volume. And so it's like, one sale comes in every, a couple weeks, I'm still, but if we look at the activities that generate that sale, it's like you might have done 100 reach outs over 30 days and then one of them becomes a sale. So it appears volatile, but really it's just you got 1% and you're doing far too little. And so if we did 100 a day, then all of a sudden we might make one sale a day. And all of a sudden it seemed very consistent. And so the volatility is only a function of insufficient volume. And so I think that misconception is why many people who start out fail quickly or choose not to start, because they are measuring their feedback loop on too short of a time horizon.
All right. So if 90% of businesses fail outright,
Sure.
96% have in common. The ones that make it, do they share something in common? And if so, what?
Well, I think to cross 1 million, you need a consistent acquisition process. I think that's about it.
Customer acquisition.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, customer acquisition process. Like in the beginning, you have to do something, period. 0 to 1. You have to do something. And then you have to make your first dollar. And then your advertising is inconsistent because you're inconsistent. Once you become consistent, then your sales become inconsistent because you don't have a process. So then you have to dial in the sales process. So basically, advertising and sales have to become a consistent process with predictive metrics. We know that if we do 100 primary actions, whether that's 100 posts, $100 in ad spend, 100 reach outs, that will generate this many leads, which generates this many calls, which generates this many sales. And it could be on e-commerce, or it could be in a service or environment like I'm describing with calls. But fundamentally, you just have to get to that equation. And once you get there, then it's just inputs and outputs. And then you're just pouring as much in and then figuring out what the constraints are from you putting more in. At least that's how I think about it.
Do you force yourself to predict the outcome of initiative before you do it?
Not as much as I used to be really honest with you. This is actually a huge change for me in terms of how we grow our portfolio now. I'm actually really curious what you think on this. Always felt like long-term planning, because when I got a year later, I was like, half these things that we were talking about a year ago, the variables of the environment, talent, many of the major movers have changed what the priorities are in the business. And so I focus almost exclusively now on what are we going to do in the next 12 weeks. Now, we obviously have long-term objectives, but I don't want to plan out forecasts and basically obsess and get everything down to the decimal when I can't even estimate the big forces that are going to be at play. Now, if I say, I think if we build the brand this year, that is a good thing and that's our number one priority, then great, then I can reverse that. But I'm reversing it only into the present for the next 12 weeks because things will change.
Very interesting. So I'm thinking a slight called the physics of progress.
Okay.
So to me, progress has a nature. There's just a way that it works. So you try a thing and it either works or it doesn't. But to know if it worked, you had to say, this is where I'm trying to end up.
Yeah.
This is what I think is my obstacle. This is the thing I think I need to do to overcome my obstacle. Now I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But what I find is entrepreneurs will lie to themselves when they get the result. And they'll be like, yeah, that's roughly what I expected. Now the problem is that will break their ability to do things as a thought exercise. And so now they have to actually test everything, not realizing they don't know how to predict the outcome. So what I tell them to do is look, and this is what I do myself. I'm going to do this thing, whether it's build a piece of content and put it out, whatever. And I think this is going to get 1 million views, 1.5, whatever. So when it does 75,000 views, I'm like, whoa, there is something I actually now seeing the execution. I don't think it's quite as good. And so now I think it's going to be this. And then you put it out. And that way, if you can really come to understand why something works or doesn't work, now you've got a better shot. But because I know I'm prone to lie to myself that, that's roughly what I was expecting, because people want to look cool.
Yeah.
But you're saying in that scenario, you guys just sort of art by the pound.
Yeah,
get a lot more things out. Are you looking to build intuition, or
the factors analysis concept is basically trying to do that? Like, how can we identify, like, we're going to do everything with these variables in addition to the last time. And if those variables don't meaningfully change, then they're not the correct variables. But it's so funny you said that, because I thought you were going to go in a different direction. So I've been putting together this $100 million scaling roadmap. It's probably the biggest project that I've done in a long time. It actually releases on Black Friday. It's free. It's free for micro framework that fits into this larger framework, which is like, how does anything scale? And then I try to make an acronym out of it, and I think I have a decent one. So S is start. You got to start. You have to do something. C is compound. You have to do more. So first you start, then you do more. A is augments, and then you do better. So it's like, okay, I've done a lot. That's the common factors part. So I'm going to try and do something better. L is leverage. So how can I get it to be content at all levels? Organizational structure. Because that one, first we start, then we do more, then we do better, then we try and make it consistent and automate it, and then we expand to the next thing. That works for markets. It works all the way across. So that fundamental unit became how I thought through scaling all 8 departments, which is what I divide everything into. So it's customer service, product, sales, marketing, IT, HR, recruiting, and finance. I don't put legal in there because I didn't think it was, most people outsource their legal anyways for a while. And so those are the 8 functions that I had of the business, going from 0 to 500 people headcount. I did 0 to 100 million because no one would know what 0 to 500 people would be. But most businesses at 500 headcount are usually over 100 million. And it was easier to draw parallels on organizational structure rather than by revenue, because like a software company like school can do $100 million with 25 people, whereas a restaurant might do $1 million with 25 people. And so doing it by revenue felt too it wouldn't be valid or useful. And so instead, I went by headcount, which had far more similarities. And so in thinking about that scaling, I broke it into, first there was functions, like what must occur in order for us to move to the next level. And then you have the people who do those functions. And then the third element is the operations that connects the people to the functions. And so that would be like training, meeting cadence, communication structures. That's all the operation side. And then the people is, what is the hierarchical, how does the pyramid in terms of thinking about scale? The scaling roadmap that I came out is just the functions part, because it was already a monster. Basically it's like an hour plus long video going through each of the functions of each of the departments at each level. And then I vetted it with a few of my friends who have multi-billion-dollar companies, and they were like, dude, this is so accurate, it's freaky. And so I was like, I felt really good about that. And they helped me with a couple of them, like I would phrase it like this, and maybe this is, made it or create some sort of leverage around it. And then we expanded the next thing was the micro concept that I then applied across all departments to tease out the functions that happen at each level.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, so again, I'm always trying to figure out where are people going to fall down, because you can give this stuff to people and they're still going to, if you have a method for that or if you just have a brain for it. But you said we need to get local call wrapping, as people are more likely to pick up a local number. So you're sitting in a room, you're not getting the results that you want, and you start thinking to yourself, what is stopping this from happening? Does it just bubble up into your conscious mind, or do you have a method?
So I would think, if I were to have to solve this problem out loud in front of everyone, I would think, okay, what we're doing is not working. What is it that increases the likelihood that I pick up my phone when a phone number calls? Okay, if I know the person and like them, that would be the highest likelihood person that I'd pick up. Okay, so Layla, that's the highest likelihood pickup. The second highest likelihood would be somebody that I know, so their number is saved. Okay, got it. Now, what numbers that I don't know would I be more likely to pick up than other numbers that I don't know? Well, a local number that would either be local from my hometown or local to my regional area. Those would be the two categories that I would probably pick. Now, the call wrapping feature that we were able to do could only do one of those because it didn't know where they were, but it did know what area code they had, so we could call from that. But if there was another software, for example, that could do both, then that would have been even cooler. But that's how I would reason through it. And then obviously the lowest probability would be like a 4-digit number that's calling from, you know, Zimbabwe, or a private call or something like that. I probably wouldn't pick up. And so I just walk through it from that perspective. Then I probably also ask other people, what are the calls that you'd be most likely to pick up? What are the calls, you know, then and walk through it, and then I would try and tease it out that way if I had to solve a problem.
Let me tell you about an AI tool that is changing how content creators work. If you're creating content,
I think this is very interesting. And I think I really like the acronym that he used on just trying to be successful at anything. Number one, you got to start. Number two, you got to have volume. You got to do a lot of it. And then he's like, you got to get better. So right now, a part of my own journey right now, working on being a content creator, I'm working on applying this. And my goal is just to do way more content, showing myself, or I don't like to show my errors or my issues or my problems, my mistakes. However, those are the exact things that help build community. So I'm showing this because I think it's going to be helpful to other people who maybe think that they smart, but they're not millionaires. And this is the way you can become a millionaire, by solving problems at scale for people, by exchanging value for money.
I had started soon. At least now I know what that sequence going back to a combustion engine. If you understand how the engine works, you can walk through and be like, it's broken right there.
Yeah.
And now you can go, okay, how would I fix that? What is the level of physics that's going to carry across? Now, what you did, which is the shortcut that most people take, is look, I'm trying to sell a thing to a guy. And so now I'm just leaping to the physics of how do you get people to do that? Like, do you have magic words? Do you have a training thing that you do for people that come on?
So first off, I think it's a practice I think it's a skill. I think you practice doing it over and over and over again, and you get better at doing it. But I would say the thing that I try to practice by modeling that other people can model is thinking about things only in the observable universe. And so eliminating a lot of the fanfare of like motivation, energy, frequency, you know, manifestation, like all of these things. I see all of those as noises that we make with our faces that may or may not increase the likelihood that we take certain actions. And those actions have either high or low correlate, or high or low correlates for the outcome that we want. And so in trying to break apart a system or a department that's not working, I think about a lot in terms of approximations. What increases or decreases the likelihood that what we want to have happen happens? And that creates a really easy razor, black and white. Does this increase the likelihood? Okay, so if our team is incentivized on performance, we'll have a higher likelihood that they do the stuff that performs. If they're incentivized on hierarchy, then it increases the likelihood that they will perform in terms of hierarchy and politics. So it's like, okay, well then I can bet, then I should do that. Then we have to get into the execution of it. But just from an ideological perspective, getting those, what would make it more likely to occur has been like my first razor for this. And then in terms of the creative problem solving, which I love that you just went through with the bar thing, is there was like an implied question that you asked, which is probably the two most frequently asked questions are the one I just said, which is what does this increase or decrease the likelihood? And the second is, what would it take? And I love that question because it presumes or it assumes success to have our own machine. Like we'd have to have a different supplier it's okay, great. Now that we know what that is, do we have the resources today, or do we need to use resourcefulness? It's one of the two. It's either we have the resources or we have to go get them. Assembling those resources. And what I found, and this is really fun stuff. This is like probably the most fun thing that I do in my life, which is asking the question of like, okay, what would it take what else would have to be true for impact theory to get 10 times the views? What would it take for us to get that? Now, that might mean we'd have to get the smartest people. Okay. Well, what does it take to get the smartest? There are 20 of those guys. And if I go to all of them, is it reasonable to believe that all 20 will turn me down? Probably not. Okay. What offer would I need to give them to make it worth it for them? And then is what I give them worth less than what I get on the larger umbrella? And if the answer is no, then we make the trade. But I think a lot of people think in terms of, I'm here. How do I do more of what I'm doing? Rather than what would have to be true for this to be 10 times they are, but it's a move that's off the board. It's not in the immediate do more. And I'm all about do more, do better, like to be clear. But every once in a while, the order of magnitude changes to the business happen when you do something different. Things you can do, but you only have this much time, this much money, this many people. And so the best strategists, in my opinion, have the most visibility into the most potential moves and allocate the asset or the resources to the thing that gets the highest return. And I think the thought process of thinking, what would it take for this reality to be true? And then working backwards has been one of the most fruitful and productive thought processes that I go through from a strategic perspective.
Dude, willing to do it.
Totally.
But you shift out of problem mindset into solution oriented mindset. This is one of the things that I find the hardest to instill in people, especially if just by nature they're a problem finder, where they can tell you all the reasons why something isn't going to work. But Peter Thiel has a really cool, everybody gets locked into this incrementalism. Like, how do I make this 10% better, 30% better? And he's like, you have to throw everything that you know away when you have to make something 10x or 100 times better. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to be reaching for what I call a frame of reference that is so radically different than the way that you look at the world now. And I'm always trying to get entrepreneurs to understand you are trapped inside of a frame of reference right now, and you don't even realize it. It's shit that your parents said to you when you were a kid. It's the girl that you asked out and it didn't go well. It's the first sales calls that you did and they failed. It's that business that went under. It's a thing a VC said to you one time in a meeting that just kicked you in the nuts. And once you understand, oh, okay, wait a second. I have to get out. I have to make something that I thought would take me 10 years. I have to make it happen in 6 months. And I refuse to let myself believe that it's impossible. So now it's like you said, what would have to be true? Yeah.
I love that. And for the beginner who's at zero. So we went sky. Now we're going to go back down to dirt. The way that you'd frame that is, what would I have to do that would make it unreasonable that I didn't get a sale? Like, how much action would you be like, there's no way? There's no possible way that if I ask 1,000 people to buy something, one doesn't buy it. There's no way. And so then you take that and he's like, okay, well, just in case I'll multiply by 10. If I ask 10,000 people, and the thing is that 10,000 is not that hard to do. Like, you hear that and you're like, 10,000. But like right now, if you think about that, you're like, well, I mean, yeah, obviously if I ask 10,000 people, okay, 100 people a day, 100 days. It's a quarter. And if right now you've been stuck in years of not making that first dollar, of years of wanting to start a business, then a quarter's nothing. And so again, we have this, well, it would be unreasonable that if you make, 10,000 asks of different people. And the thing is that you'll also have a feedback loop, which is that you'll look at the first 100. Well, which ones got closer to saying yes? Because you didn't get a yes yet, maybe you do get a yes on the first one. It happens a lot. People are like, they commit mentally to doing 10,000, and then by day 4, they're like, oh my God, I got a sale. But when
I think that this is so powerful because it teaches people about the power of sales, and it puts the hope and the power like back inside of people, because we are so many people. We are all like so dependent on somebody else using our skills to make money and to create wealth and to give us a percentage of that. And we're just addicted to that system. And we gotta like break free. We're slaves to that system. We've never seen anything else. And we haven't never had the mental framework to escape out of that. It's really what people need to be listening to every day, so we can break the mental mindset, break the mold, and put the power in your own hands.
People do that, the feedback loop of which ones went well, which ones didn't go well. What did I do in the beginning? This one's I made a joke at the beginning. Okay, I'm going to make a joke on all of them next time. Great. Now I made a joke. Okay, I got further in the sale with these guys. This guy even asked me about price. Okay, what happened in that one? Okay, this one I asked him about what he was struggling with.
He's just going over the make your first dollar in business, your first $100, your first $1,000, it's made God bleed. Then you know it's real. You know it's possible. You can make $1. It's probable that you can make 100, that you can make 10 hundreds, that you can make 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 100,000. But if you've never made $1, $5, $25, $1,000, $2,000, but once you get that confidence, it's great. It might not be gravy, but now you got 1 foot on the ground, and that's fire. That's crazy.
Earlier on. Okay, I'm gonna start asking that question too. So I'm gonna make my joke and I'm asking what he's struggling with, and I'm gonna do that 100 times. And so that's the process of iteration that can get you to that first W.
To think that, oh, if I could just not worry about embarrassing myself,
Right.
then I could get in the game, throw the punches, look foolish, but I will get better and better. I've often joked, it's definitely not a joke, but I've often said that part of what is my superpower is that I can be embarrassed. Probably more than that, because most people are going to forget that they ever encountered you in the first place. And so getting out, ultimately, I think what people care about is, they have a screaming problem that you make go away, and they'll forgive everything that they've encountered up to that point if you can, and somebody that they respect told them, no, for real, this works.
I think you have a 100% chance of bothering somebody on earth by existing. And so if every action you take has somebody who will hate it, then it kind of cancels everything out, and you might as well just do whatever you're going to do anyways.
Very fair. Speaking of somebody that clearly winds people up, you mentioned Elon earlier.
Yeah.
What is it that makes him special?
I'm
Hold on. Okay, stop for a second. The explosion bombs, but did y'all get that? It's like he said basically every decision on this planet that you can potentially do. See, somebody's gonna hate it. Somebody's gonna say it sucks, that it's ass. Somebody's not gonna like it. So if they're already thinking that you're a dummy, that you're lame, and all these things, you might as well fucking go ahead and do what the hell you're gonna do.
so many things. You know, I mean, how many guys have $6 billion companies and run all of them?
Nuts.
And have time to go all in on political campaigns in the meantime, notwithstanding what side or any of that, but just like the big question that I feel like is the unspoken one right now, at least in the zeitgeist of the entrepreneur world, is how does he do it? And I love the impossible nature of the feats that he takes on, literally pushing the realm of physics, obviously with SpaceX, but he reinvented the car industry. He's creating brain chips. He's aggressively attacking AI. I'm sure you saw the Jensen Huang interview where he's like, in terms of improvement compared to the basics, because he starts at physics and works his way up, but he truly does it because he's also like a physicist.
Right.
Like,
He actually understands physics. Yeah.
He really knows it. Like I get to pretend to sound intellectually, whatever. He really does. And so that's his material achievements. But I think the thing that I admire the most is the balls. The man is not a coward. And I think that in thinking about him, I think about what are the things that he does? What are the things that I do? He is more successful than me. How can I do more of those actions that he does in order to approximate his success? And so I think modeling is one of the most effective ways for people to learn. It's how children learn. It's how monkeys learn. It's cross species. And I think that he functions as a model for many people. Now, again, he only became political in the last 3 years. So question that he is the best, like right now people say he's the best entrepreneur of our generation. I think he's the best entrepreneur of all time.
It seems like it to me.
It's not even, to me, it's not even close. Like he is, yeah, I mean, I could get on an Elon parade, but.
Look, man, we got to get in this game. Man, I know not everybody, because everybody won't, and that's cool. That's cool. But we got to get on this bandwagon. The bandwagon of putting yourself out there, allowing yourself to be embarrassed, learn, grow, heal, fortify, That's it. Ciao.